Yeah.
Hello, how are you? Yes.
How are you doing?
The time crunch is real. Holy moly. They tell you, they hear, they talk about it until you experience it the first time. Right? Some like classmates.
What are you tonight?
So we sold our guests. We had one house that has 2 parts, and then 6 multiple choice. And we don't
Yeah. You see.
Yeah. Well, I actually change it. And I thought, I don't want
I think you and Jimmy honestly do. Yeah. You got a question, it seems like.
At the very first presentation.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's when you go. I know it
Yeah, you're like a lot of use. There's training. All for where, I see them pretty much survive. Yeah, that happens to me. So. Playground, nice there, next. Yeah.
Jets woke up on poor Derek himself.
That's where the need for give away.
Coming back? Not this week. Is that? Yeah.
So you're briefly.
You're going places. I don't know what that was disturbing. I've seen a lot of people. It's very. Well, when it stands.
All right, is everybody here? Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, all. All right, I will call this meeting of the Finance Committee in order. We are here at 6:34, the 12th of October.
Can you turn that down?
I love hearing myself.
Sorry. Thank you.
All right. Welcome, everyone. So the first order of business is for the comptroller to tell us that we made 5 times more money than we expected.
Something like that, right? All right, so everyone has a copy. I handed out the copies of it before. There's not a lot of major updates from last month. There's no new update from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Just continuing to track the way we were. We are continuing to see pressure on expenditures. You see in the summary, the first paragraph, we are 63.5% spend. Our general fund budget through August. Last year at this time, we were 58.9% spent. So that's up about 4.5%. Some of that is intentional. Some of it is the intended drawdown of reserves. We pay off debt. Some of it was for retroactive payment on employment contracts, union contracts that have been settled. But there, outside of that, there is a 7% does relate to increased spending year over year. Some of those categories I get down on the next bullet point down. Over time, we're still seeing pressure. We're 88% spent for the year, just through August. That is more than offset right now through vacancies that we have in regular pay. We're 60% spent in regular pay versus 66% of the year. Tracking for about, probably end up somewhere around 95, 96% spent for the year. Other categories are, obviously touch on these throughout the year: electricity, vehicle fuel, all the supply costs. We're seeing negative variances in. Some of the positives continue to be some of the benefit accounts. Hospital medical insurance, which is a significant cost, is still within target of budget. Some of the other categories. So overall, the expense are some negatives and positives, but overall, it's definitely going to be tighter than last year. On the revenue side, the sales tax is continuing to be strong. We just had a quarterly adjustment, which was a negative adjustment. You have the sales tax report. This payment was down 5.5% over the prior year. It's a little better than the last quarterly adjustment. But we still are 7% year over year. We're trending towards a revenue total for the year somewhere between 18.6 and 19 million versus a $16,250,000 budget. So it's still too early to give you a definitive number, but right now it's tracking towards roughly a $2.5 million positive variance for the year for sales tax. Mortgage tax collections are very solid. They are on pace to exceed $850,000. Park revenues ahead of budget. To give you our updated balances in the investment accounts, we're seeing interest rates rise pretty significantly. We're currently at over 2.3% in the investment accounts. And I provide you an updated contingency balance of $285,000. The last bullet point, the unassigned fund balance, we did finish our audit. I have sent that to the Common Council. The unassigned fund balance that I've been reporting during the year is relatively unchanged. It's a rounding difference of $2, but that number is here at $10,213,656. And happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from David?
So, John, in the expense of the vehicle fuels over 100% already spent, and so we got November, December, and so we still have 2 winter months to come here.
We're going to track significantly over budget for vehicle fuel. Electricity will likely be well over budget. Vehicle fuel will. You're going to see the construction materials supply will be over budget. But I think what you're going to see in the end is we're gonna have positive variance in other categories that are gonna help mitigate some of those costs.
Is the vehicle expense up this because of the price of, or is there anything that the city could be doing to reduce that?
For what, the fuel or?
Yeah, fuel.
No, the fuel is just, it just is the cost. I mean, you know, with the materials and supplies, it's just the inflation that you've seen, I mean, the rising costs everywhere. The fuel's not, it's not the usage, the electricity is not the usage. The electricity costs that are rising, we have, a number of contracts that we bid out on electricity. We're gonna see some significant increases with the next renewal. You know, it's just what the rates are. So, you know, I think you'll continue to see a trend of department heads coming in here with budgetary transfers, to move money around between accounts. In a lot of cases, they'll be able to cover the differences, but there are gonna be some circumstances where they're gonna need to draw from contingency.
John, do we have more vehicles than we did last year? Seems like we.
In total,
Yeah.
well, you know, there have been additions, but there's also been some surplus vehicles as well. DPW's been doing a pretty good job of surplusing some older equipment. But that, once again, that's not the driver of the vehicle fuel cost. I mean, I'm looking at, you know, what our monthly charges are, and it's,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just the price. We see in our everyday life, the price we're paying on.
And it is gonna go up because we got bigger vehicles, the plows and everything in winter.
I mean, obviously, you know, the electric vehicles do help, and that's helping mitigate the cost of where it's at now. Could be worse. Oh, I mean, you know, it's like,
Anything else for our comptroller, Michelle Hirsch?
Thank you, Rennie. John, I have a little bit of trouble hearing you. So I did hear you mention pensions, and then my question had to do with pensions and current market turmoil, and if they are affecting municipal pensions in any way.
Yes, obviously, the New York State retirement system, the rates are, you know, one of the major contributing factors to our New York State retirement system rates is market performance. So, yeah, we got notice for our next retirement system year, the rates will go up. On average, a little over 1% of payroll per employee. So sure, yeah, it's definitely a contributing factor. When the market's doing well, you know, we see the rates going the other direction. Overall, the pension rates have been controlled because of the increase in employees of the tier 6 that are coming on versus the tier 4s that are retiring. There's a significant difference in our pension contribution for tier 6 versus tier 4. But the offset is that the rates are going up for every tier next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else for John?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. I understand the Penrose legislation has been withdrawn.
No, not withdrawn,
Not
table
withdrawn?
to next month.
Just, well, withdrawn for tonight,
Yeah.
right? So we will put that on whole business for next month. Give everybody a chance to look at that more closely. Third item on our agenda of new business is the Washington Avenue Sewer District Agreement. Mayor Noble, is that you're here to,
Yep.
yes, or?
Yeah, I'll start with
Okay.
that. So just basically, there is a agreement that we have with the town of Ulster to be able to process sewage for them. That agreement was written to cover commercial in the area of Washington Avenue, just outside the city of Kingston limits. What the agreement didn't consider was any future residential development. We have a variety of sewer district agreements with the town of Ulster, which incorporated both commercial and residential rates, but this one did not. And so we'd like to amend this agreement to be able to add the residential rate that we charge all of the other town of Ulster sewer districts, which is a 5% premium over rates charged to our residents here in the city of Kingston. Commercial rates are a 50% premium in the agreements. And so we'd like to be consistent with all of those agreements, and we'd like to add that. And the reason we'd like to add that is because of a new residential development happening in the area of the Washington Avenue Sewer District. And that's why I also attached to my letter is a letter from RUPCO related to their quality in project. And so I'd like to turn it over to them. And their engineer, Dennis Larios, is also here to just tell you all a little bit about the project that they would like to be able to have us add this new clause to this agreement. So I think I'll turn it over to Emily and Kristen, and I think they have a short PowerPoint to just be able to show you guys. And so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Come to the table. Testimony hires can come to the table and give us the details. Great.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Hamilton. I'm the Senior Project Manager for Real Estate Development at RUPCO. I'm also a Kingston resident, and I'm also a member of the planning board. So we've been working on the redevelopment of 114 Route 28, which is currently a Quality Inn, for over a year now. And the reason why we chose a hotel to rehab for homeless housing was because the need for homeless housing in Ulster County is great. Most current numbers from DSS are 218 homeless cases in Ulster County, or 341 individuals. And homeless families and individuals living in overcrowded conditions are not included in DSS totals. So these are people living on people's couches, living in not great situations. So either are motels. So the majority of the people that are in that DSS count are living in motels. And the motel stays are being financed by the Department of Social Services. So these are the target populations for the project that we are working on. Serious mental illness, substance use disorders, veterans with honorable discharge, victims of domestic violence, those with HIV, young adults who have been incarcerated and are reentering, and chronically homeless. So we are converting this 145-room hotel to 82 apartments for formerly homeless individuals and families. That. The Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative will fund on-site supportive services provided by RUPCO. We were formerly working with Family Woodstock and Catholic Charities, but now they'll be provided by RUPCO, and these will include mental health counseling, case management, access public benefits, such as SSI and Social Security and SSD, and public assistance, life skills training, GED classes and job training, van with driver, and daycare. We are looking into maintaining the pool for therapeutic treatment. So as I said, 82 total apartments for homeless families and individuals, 6 3-bedrooms, 24 2-bedrooms, 26 1-bedrooms, and 26 studios. This is what it looks like now. This is what we hope to transform it into. So the parking lot in the back will be a landscaped area, and it will be more of a recreational area for the residents. In the current commercial space that used to be the Rubicons, we are looking into providing daycare. There will be support staff offices, case management offices, group therapy, perhaps a commissary kitchen, and an indoor play space. And this is the overall site. That includes, we'll be putting solar panels on the roof, and there will be a geothermal system. So what are the funding sources going into this project? We do have a commitment, a conditional approval rather, from New York State Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative. This type of funding will fund a rental subsidy and the supportive services. The construction funding that we still need to secure, our bank loan, homeless housing assistance program, a type of federal funds, home funds, and a new type of state funding that is a result of a legislation that was passed recently called Helping Our Neighbors with Dignity Act that helps to convert hotels into homeless housing. And the total estimated development cost is about 29 million. So at this point, we're looking at perhaps a construction start of summer 2023, construction completion summer 2024, and total occupancy of summer 2024. We don't think it'll take too long to occupy this, considering people are living in hotels. So, as the mayor stated, the request is to amend the intermunicipal agreement for the Washington Avenue Sewage District to add a residential rate of the sewer utility plus 5%, which applies to our residential development. And that's it. Any questions?
Tony?
It looks like it's a great project. This have right down here. It's currently used, right?
Yes, but we're about to buy it on October 27th and it will be vacant.
So quality is still up and running
Yes.
currently.
Yes.
And in regard to your plans there for, has it been any thought about job training, like
Yes.
culinary, where that kitchen or space is already there, to be able to have these people be able to learn a trade, especially in cooking, that area, come back out and be able to go out and find a job?
Yes, that is a possibility. Yes.
And have you have a new name yet for this site yet?
We've,
I hope it's not 114 28.
no, it's not. It's not, but I just kept it for the presentation. I kept just the address because we're still deciding on a name. You have any ideas?
Quality houses.
That would be a great job.
We brainstormed quite a few, but we just can't, we haven't decided on it
That'd
yet.
be a good thing, community development or community participation in that name.
I think we even actually tried that on our website, but anyway.
Just out of curiosity, I can't tell from the drawings. Are there any parts of the current structure that are gonna be usable? Or is everything gonna be raised and?
No, we are going to basically be adding walls, taking down walls, to, first, a studio apartment is gonna be the size of a hotel room. For a 1 bedroom, we're gonna have to most likely take down a wall. So, yeah, it just depends on the size of the unit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the outside, that's cladding that will go on the existing outside walls. So we're reusing the foundational structure, but obviously changing the inside layout and changing the look of the outside.
How many total was this gonna be available?
82.
82.
And so in terms of actual water usage, it's gonna be, I mean, if you had a full hotel with more people, then would be living here, right?
The water usage, actually, we could ask Dennis to
Yeah.
speak to that, as far as the volume.
Currently, the hotel, what was originally the Ramada Inn and Quality Inn, has a well supply, which is very marginal in quality. And it's got its own wastewater treatment plant off the north end of the T there, that would be on the left of that. And the current use, when the hotel is really running, at a good clip, is in the 14 to 20,000 gallon a day range. We're estimating this project would be in the 8 to 10,000 gallon a day range. The option, if we, if the rate relief was not granted as far as for the residential, would be, the other option the town would have would be to take over that treatment plant and create a municipal sewer district using that treatment plant. And that's not really desirable for anybody, I don't think, but it's just a fallback position. The town put the Washington Avenue Sewer District in 2004. I think the agreement was 2002 with the city. It's always just served 14 commercial properties, and 5 or 6 of those properties are vacant, So right now it's servicing the new car wash and the 2 quick checks. The diner, who was a significant user, is closed now. That's going to be a storage building with almost no use. So, but there are people knocking on the door just outside that district. This is the only residential one of significance. And it will, would have been a commercial rate if it had stayed a, hotel, but it probably would have continued to use the wastewater plant on site. But as part of the agreement, the county is funding the extension of the town's water district and the Washington Avenue Sewer District to this property using ARP funds. So that was something that really the town was very happy about, because there's other needs out in that corridor for water and sewer. But this rate would just be probably the only user that would be non-commercial, residential, non-commercial user would be this project. There's a couple homes on Sandy Road that are not connected that might ultimately connect behind the old diner, but all the other properties are commercial.
Okay.
And what is the rate we're looking for again? If you go back to what was?
It's 5% more than what we currently charge our residents. So there's a 5%. Yes.
Plus, just so the district, the sewer district, the town's district has a tax rate to subsidize the initial bond issue, to pay back the bond issue when the sewers were connected and constructed 15 years ago. And they also have a small charge on top of the city charge just for their maintenance of the pump station and collection system out there. But the reduction for this project would save about $200 a year per apartment in sewer charge, which is meaningful for the operation of the facility.
For Rupco, our financing for the apartment rental will come through the ESHI, the Empire State Supportive Initiative grant program, and many of the residents won't be paying any rent at all.
Well, eventually,
yeah.
they're rent.
Yeah, some of them, if they have jobs, will pay, Emily, you know this better than I do.
30%.
30% of their
Income. Right, if they come in without any income at all, then we'll set them up with public assistance or social security or SSI, depending on what's the most applicable, and then work towards getting a job, or if they're senior citizens, I don't know if
So it's really this for all the famous individuals, right? Okay.
I'm sorry I missed that stuff. I was at family issue daycare. But is this all residential? There's no commercial in that? I'm sure you said it in the presentation and I missed it.
So as of now, we're not expecting any commercial rent. The non-residential space is mostly focused on social services. Yes.
would be programming space for the residents that live there.
Other questions? If there are no more questions, then consider a motion to discuss. Connie Davis, second by Mike Riviere. Any discussion then?
This is just for the 5% decrease.
That's what it reads.
Yeah. So the legislature to amend the City of Kingston Washington Avenue Sewer District Agreement with the Town of Ulster has for attached. And the letter from the mayor is requesting that that agreement be amended. To add a clause that indicates the city of Kingston will afford Rupco a new residential rate at a 5% premium over rates paid by Kingston residents. All right. And there's also the letter from Rupco, which detailed that further.
And all does it say it's a lower 5%, is it's going to be 5%?
We're not going up 5%, it's switching from the commercial.
Yeah, so it's a 5% adjustment over whatever our current rate is. So if our rate goes up 5% for city residents, then their rate will be that plus an additional 5% over that, and then we'll continue to still have the 50% rate difference for commercial customers. So if our, we go up 10% for commercial customers in Kingston, which is, everyone, they would go up 50%.
All right, thank you. That's
Okay. Any further discussion? Michelle Hirsch?
Yeah, I'll just be recusing myself due to my employment with Family Woodstock. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Dennis, we appreciate it.
Yeah, then.
We appreciate the work y'all do.
Definitely.
The next item on the agenda is new business, is our ARP grant guidelines. John Tui. So John, and I believe our ARPA fund major domo is also here over my right shoulder. All right.
Ready? All right. So over the last several months, myself and Ruth Ann Bit from Grants Management have been working on a guidelines for the city's expenditure of ARPA funds. This is a federal requirement. The city has to have in place. It's really for compliance reasons under the federal grant. It's a best practice. It's the requirement is laid out in the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR Part 200. We have drafted these. We've reviewed them internally. We have reviewed these documents with our auditors. And what they do is essentially give the departments and the ARPA manager who are managing the ARPA funds a summarized checklist and guidelines for what may be eligible for the ARPA, right? What is eligible, what is not eligible, what considerations have to be made in terms of procurement, in terms of contract language, in terms of certifications, in terms of, in the case of the subrecipient guideline, in terms of subrecipient selection. This document is not for the purpose of choosing vendors or subrecipients. It's purely to provide documentation to ensure that our process is compliant with federal standards. Once again, it's required.
And I'm sorry. So you spoke to your partner.
Yes.
These documents they're okay with.
These actually, we reviewed the documents with the auditors. They were suggesting no changes at all. They were happy with the way they were written. So thank you. So at the back of each of these documents, right, so there's two documents. There's one for procurement of goods and services, including, construction contracts, et cetera. And then there's another document that is the guidelines for choosing a subrecipient if we were to partner with another agency to administer ARPA funds. So there's the guidelines, and then at the back of each document is actually a checklist that the program manager, the department individual responsible for putting that project into place would actually have to fill out this checklist on each procurement. to make sure that all the required steps have been taken. So then they would fill it out, they would initial it, it would go to, an individual in my office who's actually doing the grant tracking. He would assign some various numbers for tracking purposes, and then would finally have to go to the ARPA manager for sign off, that they've reviewed all the documentation.
Who's the audit manager?
The ERP managers, Bill Reynolds.
Okay.
And leftover.
That's good, all right.
Busy.
So a lot of steps involved here before.
Well, it's a lot of steps, right, so I had to pull apart, this has taken, we had to go through the final rules of the ARPA award and the codes of federal regulation, just to basically ferret out all the requirements of the grant. It's not extensive, but there's enough, and we want to make sure that, that the individuals who are spending the money are in compliance.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Other questions? Michelle Hirsch?
Thanks, Renee. So John, so things that were like that were chosen already in the ARPA report, say like the wayfinding sign. So does this mean that we have to find a new provider? Like we're going to have to put this out or for
no, well, what this will do is for anything, right, the city's ARPA plan was basically a path, right? It showed the different categories that the city intended on spending funds, and there were certain projects. When we actually go to put these projects in place and we start the procurement process on specific projects, we're going to have to go through this step when whoever's developing, say, a bid for equipment or for construction work would have to go through this compliance document, ensure that we've procured that work in accordance with federal regulations. They'll have to make sure there's certain language in the bid docs. They'll have to make sure that the contract that we enter into with the awarded contractor has certain clauses that require standards. So there's a number of steps that we have to take basically to be in compliance with federal standards. But it's not changing who we're selecting, but it's making sure that when the process that we take to select a vendor is compliant with federal standards, that we've gone through not only the city's procurement policy, but also the federal standard in making that procurement. And then also, in terms of the contract documents, there's a higher level standard with an ARPA contract than there would be a standard contract with a vendor or contractor. And then there's also, from the reporting side, there's quarterly reports that we have to send to the federal government electronically. There's certain documentation that we need to obtain at the time we're making awards. So we have that when we're doing our quarterly reports. So these documents will help us capture that information.
Okay. And will the quarterly reports be shared with the council?
I'm personally not doing those reports, but I don't intend to. I don't think there's anything that's confidential in them. So, Bill, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why the reports wouldn't be shared with the council. I mean, clearly the council has oversight responsibility over the program. And I think as part of that oversight, the council would do well actually to have these reports when they're filed. So I think the answer would be yes.
Great, thank you.
Any
Thank
other
you, John.
questions?
No, you're welcome. And just so we're clear, I mean, these reports, the reports that we send to the federal government are very, they're not very narrative, so to speak, right? It's a lot of numbers, it's a lot of codes and project stuff, so it's not, I mean, obviously it's something to be shared. But in terms of like an update for the council, it's not going to necessarily provide a lot. right? It's gonna be expenditure report is what it's gonna be. It's gonna tell you the vendors we've paid, the projects, how much we've paid. There's just not a lot more to it than that. But it is required information that we have to obtain to report. Essentially, like these expenditures, as we're spending them, we have to group them into categories. So, you'll see totals in different categories, et cetera.
Okay, so like a percentage of the total in different of the money, or, because I know we're on a timeline.
It'll be more in terms of in this quarter, this is how much we spent. And every project gets assigned this particular federal code for how it fits into the Code of Federal Regulations in the project expense categories. So you'll see this project code, we spent X dollars, this project code, we spent Y dollars. This is how much we've spent in a quarter. This is how much we've spent cumulatively, I believe is reported on there as well. And in some cases, there's requirements for reporting vendor information when payments to a particular vendor exceed a certain dollar amount.
I think just to add what I think will be more helpful is twice a year we do our quarterly grants update, activity update, where Dan produces an entire book of where we are with every project. Bill will be working with Dan to be able to have that, twice a year update of all of our ARPA projects. What's the status of the ARPA project? How are we doing on them? What's the timeline? What are we getting done? And so that will also be included in that twice a year kind of guidebook. And I think that will be really probably more instructive to be able to at least provide more project details other than just how much is being actually spent.
Right. Yeah, I mean, our reports in federal government are of great interest to our auditors, but they're not a user-friendly document.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? In that case, I'll call for a motion to discuss. Michael Olivieri, second by Tony Davis. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. And Michelle will be signing for you, yes? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Erin.
Next, we're going to move to the disposition policy that we've been discussing. This was sent back to committee from the Common Council. So first, let's see, who made the motion? Send it back? Michelle. So Michelle, you want to get us started on discussion of this and what we'd like to see go into it?
Well, I had concerns about the portion of the disposition policy that pertained to the properties over $30,000 and the RFQ process if there isn't a response for affordable housing. I'm concerned about it just coming back as no takers, and then it go out as market rate liquidation of our property. So I've been told all along that we don't want the council in charge of this, but yet that's the way it actually should be going. And so I think that the council involvement should not be just rubber stamping what happens through the RFQ process. And I think that the council and the finance committee need to be more actively engaged in the process as it used to be. I know that Alderwoman Worthington had other concerns, but I can't speak to those.
Okay, good, thank you. If I may, I am in accord with the idea that the council should not give up its power to be involved in this process. My concern through the whole process has been to avoid the appearance of the council having conflicting values, because when I first got on the council, it was literally the council that sold the properties. People would come to the council with proposals, and members of the council would sit around and decide which proposal. You remember that, yes? And to me, that's inappropriate. The elected officials should not be directly involved in selling properties. However, when it comes to the disposition policies to responsible parties for selling those properties, I'm fully in accord with the council keeping its powers. And I was looking at some other disposition policies and some of the things, and I agree with Michelle Hirsch too, that the concern here has to do with making sure that these properties are going to low-income families, and that the vast majority, if not all of them, go to low-income first-time home buyers where appropriate. So some things that I would like to see added here would be revisiting this issue. I know that it holds out the possibility, it seems that some properties could be sold for just about any price at all. I like that there's a kind of tiered element here that suggests when the land bank sells a property, that it clarifies how much money should be coming back to the city at those different income levels or different sale levels. However, it does seem to suggest that some of these properties could go for fairly large prices. So part of what I'm concerned with too has to do with the sense that this, the way this is worded, it still gives the land bank a right of first refusal. And so I would like for it to be clarified that this is a guiding policy and not a required policy. There is some language in there that kind of suggests that the council retains its power, but I don't think it's clear enough. I would also like, to consider some things like requirements that the land bank demonstrate extensive publicity of sales to low-income residents across the city. I have not seen this in my experience. I've worked with a number of organizations around town, and they have not heard anything about sales of these properties. I think the land bank needs to do a much better job of letting low-income people know about the possibility of purchasing properties, and then making it possible for low-income people to actually purchase the properties. I would also like to see language either here or somewhere that requires that the KCLB publish on its website the salaries of its principal employees, or at least make sure that the proper documents are filed so that a place like ProPublica can publish those salaries. In looking at some other disposition policies, one of the things I saw, the city of Newburgh, for example, also has a purpose that's in the disposition policy. And so it reads, the purpose of their disposition policy is to promote principles that result in a beneficial, standardized, and transparent policy for the sale of city-owned surplus real properties. The city's disposition policy seeks to, 1, encourage redevelopment of city-owned buildings and land, 2, recapture the city's property tax loss, 3, strengthen the city's tax base, 4, eliminate blight and revitalize neighborhoods, and 5, expand home ownership opportunities, especially for City of Newburgh residents. This gives a clear sign to future councils what the intent was behind passing this kind of disposition policy. I'm not saying we'd have adopt that word for word, but I think that's an important thing to have directly in the document, so that this is far more clear what it's for. Yes.
I don't want to interrupt.
Oh, I'm on a train. I'm going.
I'm not going to get on that train track. Until you're done.
All right. And I think too, as I said, I would like to see clearer language in it about the power reserved to the legislative body. That's good enough for now. I'll pull the train into a station.
I just want to make a couple of comments that aren't necessarily going to take us into attorney-client session, but just to clarify that there are different types of policies, and without going into any other jurisdictions' policies, state law distinguishes between sort of these specialized policies, like, for example, disposition policies pursuant to an urban renewal plan, and the kind of guidelines that are before the council now. And if we want to have a more detailed discussion about that in a privilege setting, I'm happy to do it. But Newburgh, the disposition policy in Newburgh is pursuant to other statutory authority. It's not sort of the general disposition guidelines that really don't change anything in our code or don't deviate from the in-rem procedures set forth in the real property. But I'll just say that for a deeper discussion, if anyone wants it.
Fine, my point is more, like I said, we wouldn't need to, I'm not saying we adopt word for word what they have, but they have a clear set of purpose.
But they give a different power, because then you're able to actually circumvent council ruling, but that's not what we're talking about.
Right. No, all I'm talking about is that we give a very clear set of values in the document itself. So that, I mean, we can work those out, you know, and be specific along the lines you're talking about. That's what I would like to see, because I'm concerned, as somebody who's tried to understand past legislation that was not clearly written, or that could even be clearly written, but there's no definite sense of what the thinking was behind it. That's my main concern, is that we clarify that in this document. So those are some of my thoughts here, other thoughts.
I mean, my thing with this is whatever we agree on, emotion has to be taken out of the equation. Because there may be properties that, you know, we don't feel like, you know, we want this property to go to this particular group or this particular, you know, like take, for example, the one that we're going to be talking about next. You know, I'm just going on face value for what Bartek said, that, you know, they met all the requirements and everything like that, but then we find out that this developer had no intention on doing it for low-income housing. If our policies have to state that if we have done everything that we were supposed to do, you know, from A to Z, then if we're not happy with the end result because it doesn't suit our emotional needs, that we still can't go against it. Like, it's basically like a checklist, like what we were talking about earlier. Have all these steps been done? If all the steps are done and the highest bidder was someone who has no intention on doing this for low-income housing, we might not agree with that, but they did everything they were supposed to do, and that's it. So, I mean, that's one thing, like, I would absolutely want to see that, you know, we have that end game checklist. Okay, you know, the property's gone to this point, we're reviewing it, did they meet this? Did we get all the supporting documentation we need for it? Good. Do we like it? Maybe not, but they did everything they were supposed to do.
I totally agree with
It's
you.
important to have these conversations and make sure everybody's content with it, because if we're making it more like a checklist, like we're doing A, B, and C, like, we need to make sure everybody's content with making sure, you know, any of the considerations that you have, sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I don't have much of a voice, so, so, yeah, I mean, maybe my suggestion is go through, and I missed a little bit about what Michelle was saying, go through some of these suggestions and just maybe one at a time, and seeing if it's something that it's worth, you know, changing the policy or adding it to the policy. And seeing what the committee's thoughts are, thinking one thing, that was just a lot.
Yeah, so maybe the thing to do would be, I think we've got some definite ideas. Basically, you know, I would accept, you know, comments, suggestions from anybody, and then whoever wants to, we can sit down with Bartek, Mike, whoever's involved, and work that through so that we can improve the document from our point of view. Does that sound acceptable to people? Michelle Hirsch?
Yes, I just had a question. I'm sorry, my memory is not clear. I just wanted clarification about the $30,000 price point. I mean, what if there's a property that say is $35,000, like we can't offer it to the land bank, or, you know what I mean? Is there going to be, like, I think we need some wiggle room in this situation. So I just want to see where the land bank, you know, what they feel about that. Is that a number they chose, or since they're here, I just wanted to hear from them.
All right, if I may, just before that, so I think that comes kind of in between what we're talking about here, because on the one hand, we want a checklist. On the other hand, we have to be aware that sometimes there's going to be a property that comes in that doesn't fit the checklist. And that's a perfect example of when the council will need to have the authority to make a decision. So, you know, that's why we're going to be careful about how much authority we give up in any kind of situation like this. So your question, can you state your question directly?
Right. So I'm just wanted to back up to the threshold of 30,000 above and be below the 30,000 mark, you know, which goes to land bank or which would go out to RFQ. Does the land bank feel that they would be potentially interested in properties that could come between the 30 to 35 or 30 to $40,000 mark? So that I just want to know, like, further clarification. So
we think that's a question to the land bank representative. We'll understand.
So that number in particular came about after lots of discussion with Steve and John. We absolutely would be interested in properties that exceed that in back taxes. As far as we're aware with the list of foreclosed properties, that cutoff basically potentially grants us one home currently. The hope over time is that back taxes reduce as foreclosures sort of happen on a, I guess, slightly accelerated schedule from what they've been in the past. That being said, I mean, the amount of back taxes really has very little to do with the property or any of its qualities. So, you know, we have 488 Hasbrook, the back taxes are somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000. It's a little tiny house that needs all the same work that the rest of our houses need. So, I guess, short answer long, it's not a number that we chose, it's a number that we accepted.
Okay. And I just want to, I just want to state for the record that, like, I think our ultimate goal as a council and as administration, that we work to keeping people from losing their homes to begin with and going into the in-rem process. And I hope that this is a problem that we don't have in the future, right? So I just need to say that. Okay, thank you.
Well, I mean, on this topic, I mean, how we got to 30,000 and how, you know, John and I kind of got to suggesting that number, I think all has a lot to do with, as you can see, as a part of this proposal, there were discounts given to the land bank, which is basically the city for giving back taxes, right? So you can look at that as the city's investment into affordable housing, because, you know, for some of these properties, if they cost $29,000 and they're going to someone with a 80% or less AMI household, we were only going to charge the land bank $7,000 for that house. And so we would take a $22,000, you know, kind of loss. And we felt like, you know, for houses that had that $30,000 or less, like there could be a system in place that we then understood what our losses were, and we could manage those losses, you know, with our budget and with our systems in place. For properties that are over $30,000 in taxes, we could not come up with a system that could allow us to generate those losses without having a much more in-depth conversation about what is the quality of the house, what would the impact of us getting that house renovated do to the neighborhood, the positive impacts, what is the current tax situation or the title situation, and by doing an RFP process, at $30,000 or above, it allows more voices to come to the table It allows nonprofits like RUPCO or the Kingston City Land Bank to come to the table. It also would allow private developers that may have more private capital that still may want to do affordable housing or not to come to the table as well, so that we as a city and as an RFP team, review team would be able to look at all of these different options and say, well, what is best for this specific house that has $70,000 in back taxes? We need to at least make sure that we evaluate all of our options before we propose something to the common council for you to sell it to someone. We really felt like that was really important after that $30,000 mark. And again, the normal amount of taxes that someone pays in the city, even a house that's assessed at $250,000, you're only paying around $8,000 to $10,000 in property taxes. And so really, if we're doing our job of getting any foreclosures that have to happen done within a 2 to 3 year time period, there should never be in the future houses that we're taking for more than 30,000. Right now, we have a bunch that are more than 30,000 because we're trying to clean up a really messed up rent system that hasn't worked well over the last decade. And so we've got houses that have $70,000 or more in back taxes. And so that's why we really felt like we needed to have a line to be able to kind of switch to that new process.
So thank you, because that kind of leads into this. So if our second goal, which is the first one is obviously have the homeowners keep their home. If our second goal is to give what we can to the land bank and the 30,000, I understand your basis with the 30,000 number. How about we just say land bank has, for lack of a better term, first dibs on the property. If it's under 30,000, we would give them the discount. If it's over 30,000, then there would be no discount. That gives the land bank the ability to bid on some of those properties first. And if they don't, if they say, listen, there's $50,000 owed in taxes, that's not something, we'd be able to work with, then we just continue with our process.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I say that we, after the 30,000 and we do a request for proposals, we could get 5 proposals in and they all only offer 10,000. And so the 30,000 isn't necessarily the city, I think, proposing anyway, that every property that's over 30, we have to get that much of back taxes because we may not. But what it does is it also provides, some opportunity for us to be able to work with other nonprofits, right? And so I think one of the things that we heard from some of the other public comments and letters that we received from organizations like RUPCO was that by having an RFP process happen after a certain point, it also then gives them, that organization and Youth Build and Habitat and other organizations also access to getting these properties. And for this, we felt like there'll be there's a set of houses that could go to the land bank over a period of time. And then after the $30,000 number, we would at least be able to evaluate who's interested. And, there may be a reason that the land bank is really interested in this one house because it's right next to 3 other properties. And so in an RFP review process, we would take that probably pretty highly in the scoring. But then there also could be the same thing that happens for RUPCO. They may have a house that they're really interested in rehabbing because it's right next to one of their developments. And we may take that higher in the scoring. And we just feel like we as folks who are trying to review these RFPs and you as the common council should have some option, at some point in this process, especially for them over the 30,000 mark, where, we hope to be able to create a pathway for properties under 30,000 to get to the land bank so that they have a constant feed. And then all the other organizations, including the land bank, they can still apply over 30, would have, maybe not a guaranteed feed of houses, but could at least pick and choose based on what we have available and what may fit with their mission at the time. And that's why we kind of left ourselves a little bit of flexibility in developing this process.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, I know that some of this was said earlier, but our intent with this policy and all of this work is that all of these, responses and our recommendations to the common council are just recommendations to the common council. And this policy at no point takes away any authority from the common council to be able to sell properties, because that is stated in state law and in our charter that, the common council has ultimate authority on who to sell properties to. Well, this does give me the ability, once you sell a property, to transfer deeds and to sign all the paperwork. You still have the ultimate authority, and this disposition policy cannot change what state law says that is the ultimate responsibility of a city council.
But I think part of the checklist would also be a flow chart of how it works. So that we would see when things happen. And I think that would clarify where the council comes in.
Yes, it comes back to, from my understanding here from some of the council members, is that, and thoughts out there that the common council is, being left out of the process or not having hand in it. So I just think some verbiage, and it's the mayor saying that state law dictates that nothing is sold without our approval. And then we just gotta make sure that's in the language that I think is what I feel some people are concerned about, that we're losing some of that control. And so I don't know if that language can just be included in this process or not.
I'm just gonna put on the table for everyone to take home and peruse. Nice night of reading. That's real property law 1166. These are sections 106, 1 and 2 of our code, and this is a flow chart of the common council's current.
Michelle Hurd.
Thanks, Renee. Can I ask to be emailed a copy of that, please?
Sure.
Thank you. So I guess what the verbiage or the language regarding our control under that law is the RFP process that we're discussing, or the RFP team or committee, however what we're calling it. So the council is not involved until someone, there's a choice. So I think that the council, the finance committee, however we decide to do this and follow our own code, it needs to be from the get-go, from the moment that a property is identified, and that the council is involved as part of that process, the RFP process.
And I think that may be a question more for Barbara about whether or not, and what level does the council get involved in, the RFP process versus, when does the council get involved? And I think that, maybe that's something that has to be done in, client attorney session, but I think just to talk more about that would be good to clarify.
And this is really directed at Barbara, but are we privy to those RFP details?
Which would be.
So kind of touching on what Michelle was saying, but I'm just maybe trying to simplify it. Like part of the packet, or my checklist in my creation, we could see what the numbers were for the RFPs. Like, does the council have that ability, or is it just the RFP review process? And then, they said, okay, we went with this person, so we just have to accept that. Like, do we have the ability to look and say, company A, company B, and company C put in RFPs, and this is what their numbers were, et cetera? Like, is that part of the packet we can get instead of?
That's not a yes or no question I can memorize, but let me just make a couple of comments that come to mind. First, we're talking about RFP, and I just want to clearly separate. I know there's some discussion before about different review procedures. RFP is generally a term that we use when we're referring to, like what Brian Waldman does. I'm looking at John, but that kind of formal structured process of competitive bidding that's set forth in state law, and that has a lot of kind of separate requirements, like when we go and try to buy vehicles or something. Mm-hmm. That is the RFP process. Everything else we're talking about is pulling together a group of individuals who can review in, a structured way. First, reviewing all of the applications, scoring them on a, defined score sheet individually, meeting, going over the numbers, and then ranking and coming to some accord. Mm-hmm. So whatever letters we use to describe that is separate from the kind of Brian RFP process.
Sure.
But if we're calling it an RFQ or whatever else we're going to call it, your core question seems to me to raise two issues, and I want to think about the second one. I have a gut answer, but I just want to think about it, and maybe we can have a separate conversation, more detail with me and the members of the committee. But you're asking two things. One, can you see material? And I don't see why not. But the second seems to be, can you be a part of the process? And I have a good answer on that, but I'd rather talk about that later.
Well, I think and I'm not speaking for Michelle, but I believe she was saying being part of the review process. I've been on a couple of them and they're tedious. So my thinking was, we get like a summary, like, okay, these were the companies we had, these are the companies that submitted it. And, we went with company A because this, and this. And then part of our packet for reviewing, if this property is gonna get it, is we look at these things and we say, okay, okay, I understand why they went with company A, and then go through our checklist and make sure everything's okay. That way we have an understanding, not just the RFP people said, we went with this company, and then that's really it. Then we just have to go with their word.
I think there's some really easy ways to get at the type of information that you are looking for and that type of clarity, and I think we should continue that conversation in a separate discussion, but it can be resolved.
Can I just clarify one thing? When you say they, do you mean the mayor's administration or the land bank?
The administration, whoever, the Bartek or whoever it is, like that, the initial people who review the proposals that were submitted. And then they say, okay, here's company A, here's company B, here's company C, we looked at them, all right, we like company C. And then, as in the next whole business that we're talking about, we're just told, okay, we reviewed the RFP, this is the company we're going with.
Yeah, I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
It's kind of the mayor's administration, not the land bank.
Yep. And thank you.
All right, my battery's running low, so can you So, any other discussion then on this tonight? Because the way that I think we're leaving it is, we'll put this back on old business. And I will accept comments, suggestions, possibilities. So whatever people have, I'll also collect. We've gotten some letters and so forth. We can put all that together and look at possibilities and think about how to edit or revise, if we want to, the document as it's currently formulated. Is that
So you're gonna do the homework and then bring it back to the full committee?
right? But I would share it beforehand, so that people can think it through in advance. So hopefully at the next meeting, we can hammer out what we think needs to be there. Unless we want to do it with a group of people in advance.
I was just thinking of your workload, that's all. There's a lot of work. You're in for it, go for it.
Well, I get paid the big bucks.
My only concern, not concern, my only suggestion is that we're gonna do that homework and then come back with, that should we have a meeting with our attorney? Just so we're not back here in the same place next month talking about things that we might not be able to do.
Well, why don't we plan on doing an attorney-client session at next finance?
Okay, all right.
And you say, because if you're gonna share it, you can share it with the committee, and share it
Yeah.
with Barbara, so she can get time to do her own homework.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if folks can get me stuff in the next week.
We would like, what we would like to see added in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if you get it to me the next week, that gives me 2 weeks to procrastinate and then a week to do the work. That's a profession.
So that's what you learned from your students then?
What do you think they learned? All right, so everybody good with that? Everybody good with that? Okay, okay.
Okay, so.
Rennie, I just want to make sure I heard, it's hard to hear. So
Yes.
we're going to give you our input in the next couple of weeks, and then we're going to bring it back to finance next.
1 week, hopefully everybody can get their comments to me in 1 week. And then I'll put together those things, share them with people on the committee, and the council in general, and with Barbara and interested parties, right? And then we'll have a dedicated attorney-client session at the next finance committee meeting to go over those and to think them through in greater detail.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And a procedural question. I know that Alderman Hirsch had requested that this also go to the Laws and Rules Committee. Is that going to happen? Is that, have you made a decision on that? Is that?
I mean, it seems like we're kind of hitting all the points, right? And if we're pulling the full council into making comments, Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think
I'm just
if
curious.
we're doing this committee is doing all of this work, I don't think it needs, I think it'd be redundant to go through lots of rules.
Okay, let's clarify.
But I mean, I do think, like, instead of just a committee, to have all members of the council send you some comments.
Okay. Suggest-
Yeah, so instead of just a committee, that's why
Yeah.
we get all voices.
Good, all right.
Also, I just want to clarify, I actually wasn't the one that made the motion to send this back to committee. I think it was you, Rennie.
Well, I got off the hook by having you go first.
I sent back the other piece, so I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, no harm. Great, so that one's settled, so we make sure we put that on the whole business for next month's finance committee meeting, which will be November something.
Yeah.
And
To be determined.
let's see, so then we move on to the next item of old business, which is resolution 192 regarding the transfer of 623 to 629 Delaware Avenue to POK Beacon LLC. You did make the motion on that one, right? Michelle?
This one I did, and I actually, I have a question for Barbara Graves Poller.
She's here.
We were asking earlier, like talking about RFP, RFQ. So is there a different legal definition for RFEI?
I don't know what law you were referring to when you mentioned that there is no law defining what you're talking about as far as I know. I'd be happy to look at whatever you're referring to.
Okay, just because that was the process used on the Delaware property, so it was a different process.
Makes sense. It was a description given to a process that is distinct from the Brian Waldman process I talked about before. When we have that, there is one purchasing sort of procurement that is subject to a set of particular rules. That's not what we're talking about. Everything else that we're talking about, you can call it an RFEI or RFQ or whatever you want to call it, it involves a select group of individuals with some understanding of the task at hand, undertaking a systematic review of applications that have been made public or offer, an opportunity that has been made available to the public for a defined period of time. But we are not talking about the kind of formal procurement process. On this other end, outside of that process, it is a structured review, no matter what you call it. So I don't know if you've seen something different that leads you to think an RFEI is actually a legal definition, but I'm happy to look at whatever you found.
No, I have not looked at anything. I'm just asking a question based on this resolution. That's all. Thank you.
So as I remember, part of the issue relating to the transfer of this property had to do with whether it be geared toward market rate or affordable housing somehow. What are the concerns people have about this issue? Why is it back before us? If you could articulate that, I'd appreciate it. Tony?
Again, I wasn't one of the ones who wanted to bring it back, that I voted for it, that, I believe I think it was this language that came down from what I was understanding, that people were concerned about this RFP, which is RFQ or RFPI, which, speaking to court counsel and prior to last month's common council, and I was explained to what the difference is. And that's, Barbara has stated several times in this meeting, and RFP is basically blind-balling, if you want to say, and everything else is not. And I've seen that the team from reading the information, the mayor, the city, put together a team that consisted of people who are, deal with these kind of issues, these kind of things. They went through and the bids that were there, and this bid for this POK Beacon was the best proposal. And that, I think, was a 3-person committee, am I right?
Yeah, I was involved, but Bartek can explain
I
that.
believe Bartek was 3-person committee, you and Sue Cahill and Steve Knox.
That's correct, yes.
And so, and I I'm just, again, I think that was one of the confusion parts on it. Was that.
That makes sense to me.
There were members of the caucus that did bring up the affordable housing, how they were upset it wasn't affordable housing. So, I mean, I don't think anybody in this room brought it back, but just because you asked what was the reasoning on the floor, that was, so it was that, a little bit of the language confusion, which seems like we got cleared up. But there was real concern about the fact that it wasn't affordable housing. And I don't know if there's really anything we can do about that, so, you know.
I think that's when it comes back to what we were just discussing. Another thing is, what's the common council's, what is our authority in regard to that?
And that's where I was talking about taking the emotion out of things, you know, like, I don't think anyone here is happy that it's not going to low income. But again, I think as our council duties is to say, okay, are we satisfied from what Bartek told us that all the requirements were met to do this process, to sell this property to that person. If that is the case, then yes, you know, we have to sell the property because it was done the way it was supposed to do. Is anyone happy that it's not going to go to a low income area? No, of course not. But again, did the checklist, all the boxes get checked? Was everything done the right way? If so, then, you know, like I said, Tony and I are on the same page with the verbiage that was used in this, but it's now, okay, that's been clarified.
Bartek, can you speak to that? And then Michelle, I think you wanted to say something? Yes, okay.
Right. I mean, in doing this process, I followed all of the standard procurement rules of the city. This, you know, was open for over 30 days. I held 3 open houses. This was widely advertised. So I followed all the steps that would be expected of a process of this type.
What do you mean by widely advertised?
It was posted on New York State's a website that we post all, you know, RFPs or RFQs or RFEIs on. I personally sent it around, you know, to dozens of my contacts here in the city of Kingston. It was also posted on Zillow for the period of time that it was available, just for maximum coverage. The city publicized this RFEI via all of its marketing channels. You know, so anything that I had in my disposal to advertise this RFEI, you know, it was followed.
Okay, thank you for that. Michelle?
Yes, so I have 2 things. First, I'd like to say that I ask that this be referred back to committee until we get the disposition policy finalized. Because the actual disposition, I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse here in this situation. And the disposition policy that we have on the table says that if the city fails to receive qualified responses to the RFP, or if the city rejects the proposals received, or if the common council fails to approve the conveyance of any property to an RFP respondent, the city shall hold a public auction and sell the property to the highest bidder. So that's, so we're not even following the process that we're potentially going to put in place. I'll just say that.
But I would say that, you know, I'm saying, and the evaluation committee for this RFEI is saying that we do have a qualified respondent to the RFEI. And, you know, there's a risk with putting any property on auction. First, it's possible that we don't even get the amount of back taxes. But second, we lose total control. So here we have a respondent in Peter O'Kennedy that has done other projects in the city of Kingston, that is trusted by the billing department. We know he's not going to sit on this property for a long period of time. So, you know, we have more control by transferring this property via the RFP process versus this auction system, which has a very, in terms of successes, right? It has a checkered history within the city of Kingston. So I issued this RFEI back in the spring, when this disposition policy that is currently being drafted, right, wasn't even put together in any way. So I think it's a little bit unfair for us to then, fit this within that particular disposition policy. I'll also say that, even if we did follow the disposition policy with this property, this was, rejected by the land bank due to the type of property that it is. And so because of that, it was put to the RFP process, and anyone, could have responded, including the land bank, including the other affordable housing developers within the city. And of course, they chose not to apply. So I do think, I worry about putting this up to auction because we lose control and we, further delay this project.
Mayor Noble, did you want to-
He said everything I was going to say. So.
Okay.
So I have two, may I ask 2 questions of Bartek? So Bartek, I just want you to know, I appreciate you. And I know that you put work into this. So when we talk about control with the project and having control, are we putting stipulations on this transfer of the property? Like, is there a stipulation that this landlord that we feel like we have control of can't flip the property? Is there?
Yeah, I think, that would have to be a discussion with Corporation Counsel. I understand in the past, there have been reverter clauses put into the deed to account for those types of situations.
So yeah, so I'm just trying to understand what the control is that we believe we have. And then I guess my second question is, we keep saying that, keep hearing that the property needs so much work, but do we have an engineer's assessment of what that work is? Do we have anything other than people looking at it and giving a subjective, it's too much work? It requires a lot of work.
I did not perform a formal engineer's analysis for this property.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever done that before. But also, in a sense, it's not just, fly-by-night people running in. We've had experts in the market of real estate and redevelopment looking at it. So in that sense, this $149,000 is a judgment of a lot of people. And to that extent, then I think what Bartek is saying holds a lot of water here. Other comments?
I mean, as a state, it went out for bid, and people, and it was out there for many days. Everybody had an opportunity to come to the open house to take a look at the property, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe Bartek, if you go over, I think he said the land bank came in and said that it was too much money. Wrong?
It's more complicated.
All right, I think Rupco and Bartek, did Rupco look at this property?
They did not even look at it, but they chose not to respond.
So, we had parties out here that are in this market, in this business, and they decided that for whatever reason that this wasn't a property for them. And this gentleman or this LLC looked at the property, decided that it does need some work. This is what I'm willing to do. I can do this. And again, 3 people in that field from the city of Kingston went through these bid process and said, this is the right place. This is a person or a company that can do this. I don't know how we go back through them and say, no, we don't trust their judgment. We got to do this process over it. We will be doing that with every property then that comes up that, no, we don't trust what this team was set up to do. Now it's a common council that none of us are into a real estate business, but now we have to try to figure out, get into this real estate business. That is why the old way of selling the property wasn't good, because people in the council at the time were saying, I'm not a real estater. How am I going through this process, trying to figure out who's the best? We set this up this way. we have these people on board that's their job to do that. And now at the last hour, we're saying, we don't trust what you guys did. We want to now take this property back and do this all over again. And there's no guarantee. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
That kind of reminds me of the almshouse situation, where one of the argument was, waiting for a business to take over, which, pay more taxes. The business never came to take it over, right? So this is kind of the same thing, but I guess on a more progressive person's side is, affordable low-income housing would be preferred, but it's not coming.
At the same time, Marge Gallagher, a different discussion on Facebook pointed out, we need housing, and we need housing at all levels. And so this would be 4 units of housing. And even if it is in the market rate, we still need housing at that rate. And so, to that extent, I think that this is the best offer that we are going to look at for this particular property. I think that Bartek and the team did a very thorough job in looking at it. So, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's already been several comments about, we trust that the process was followed. We may not agree with what's going to be put in there, but that's always going to happen. Everything that goes on in the city, some people agree with it, some people disagree. We know that, we see it every day. And I wouldn't call it bargaining in good faith. We're going to go back now and say, we don't really like this now, even though everything was done, like Mike said, we checked all the boxes were checked. I mean, it sounds to me like they did this the proper way. We reached a tentative agreement, I wouldn't like to go back on that. And we have a limited amount of bids. To put it back out for bids just because we don't buy into the philosophy of the developer. I don't agree with that.
Okay. Anything else? Then if we can have a vote, then to send it back to the council, or do we want to keep this on, need to have a motion to send it back to the full floor? Mike Olivieri, Tony Davis, any discussion about sending it back to the floor for final consideration?
Sorry, I should have said this 30 seconds ago, but if we, just to consider, because I think that still people will be against us. So if we consider if this gets voted down, what would then happen to this property? Would it go to bid? Maybe that's a question for Bartek.
I'm sorry.
No, what a no vote would, the consequence of a no vote would be.
We could decide whether it's worth putting this out to another RFEI process or whether it goes to auction. Under the disposition policy, it would go to auction likely.
Just so everybody's clear what could potentially happen.
Yeah, and just to clarify on that it could be the same guy could bid on it and bid $1 and still do whatever he wants with it, and now he just lost over 100 something.
Yeah. That's the gamble.
That's the gamble, that's the bet.
And I apologize for trying to just said that. Before.
Well, that's part of the thing. So, yeah, something else to say?
No.
Oh, we got a motion. We've had some discussion. Any other discussion about sending this back to the floor? Sending 192 back to the floor for the full consideration of the council. All right, so all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Michelle Hirsch. All right. Okay, so we'll go back to the floor of the council. I don't think we need a.
Do we need a resolution?
Well, we already had sent it to the floor first, so we don't need another, right? All right. So I believe that's it. Is there anything else? Any surprises anybody on us? It is October. All right. In that case, then, we'll call for a motion for adjournment. Second, everybody is, okay, all right, good. We are closed here at 5 minutes after 8 o'clock. Thank you, everybody.
And also working on the budget season schedules, so we'll talk very, very soon.
So, right.
So we'll see each other a lot. Yes.
I'm late the last week of this month.